This is Speaking of Writers. I'm Steve Richards. Suzanne Perrin is an early childhood professional with a passion for literature. Suzanne has spent many years working in schools, running private day programs, and teaching preschool. She focused a large portion of her time on children with exceptional needs and is fluent in American Sign Language. Creating beautifully written books requires equally beautiful illustrations. Suzanne's illustrator is her daughter, Katie Morgan, who is an artist, draftsman, and mother to 3 little girls. Together, this duo engages young minds with quality children's literature to be treasured and shared. Suzanne's book is Mrs. L. Bug. Happy to have Suzanne join me now here on Speaking of Writers. Suzanne, welcome to this program.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So where did the idea for Mrs. L. Bug come from?
I was taking a course from the Institute of Children's Literature, and Stephen Roos was my instructor for that course. And throughout the program, he would drop little ideas as we went along for learning. And I believe it was one of the lessons we were working on that sort of tweaked an idea in my mind. And then it just grew from there.
What do you hope to achieve with these books?
Well, it's always been my dream to write for children, but to give them literature that's quality, like, the literature we had as children where there's something in it for them to learn, the illustrations are beautiful, and to instill in them a joy of reading and actually having a material product in their hands that they can enjoy and treasure. That each book has a little lesson inside it that's suitable for children, also to do with friendship, things like that.
I mentioned in the introduction, you've always had a passion for literature. You're an early childhood professional. Did you always want to write?
No, actually, as a child, I started off not even knowing what I was interested in for reading, but I always had an ability to remember things and see things in details, and I was always daydreaming and coming up with little stories in my mind. And as I got older and started enjoying reading, it just sort of blossomed and became a passion, became something that I decided I just really, really wanted.
How important is it, Suzanne, to read with your child and to your child?
I believe that not just the quality time that you spend with a child, sitting with them and spending time with them, but to actually help them to understand the beauty of escaping into perhaps a fictional story, or to help them to explore what's out there in nonfiction material, and to be able to sit down quietly somewhere by yourself and open a book and just enjoy that imagination time is something that children learn from adults, something they see us doing. It's something we teach them as we go along, and we don't want to lose that. We don't want to lose that art, that joy of actually holding a book and reading it.
We're chatting with Suzanne Perrin here on Speaking of Writers. Her book is Mrs. L. Bug. So when did you start writing, and where did you go to school for writing?
I started writing about 13 years ago. I took a course through the Institute of Children's Literature in Reading, Connecticut, and it was about a year-long course that took probably a little longer than it would have, because we used snail mail to pass stories back and forth, and for my things to be edited and be sent back to me. And I have been writing ever since, but am only just now starting to get busy with the actual publishing.
Suzanne, where does your inspiration come from?
Much of it comes from the children that I spend time with. I'm always watching and observing, and quite often they'll say something that will just blossom into a story. And sometimes it's actually an adult that says something, and I have this way of sort of seeing everything through the eyes of a child and imagining what a child would think of what was being said. And so it just comes from that. I go for long walks and I see things outside that make me think, of a little story that could go along with it. And it just seems to be a natural thing that comes to me.
So give us a little synopsis of Mrs. L. Bug.
Mrs. L. Bug Starts off with a little ladybug that's, I guess, a little bit in her own world and very particular about her belongings and keeps her beautiful little mushroom house just perfect. She's very fussy and she likes her quiet life, and she happens to have some neighboring ants that are often coming through and disrupting things and causing chaos and helping themselves to her house and destroying her garden, and she just is absolutely fed up with them, and after a little bit of thinking decides that she needs to get rid of them. So she decides that she better figure out how to move them so that they're not anywhere in the vicinity of her house. Along the way, in the process, she realizes she hasn't got a clue where ants live, and so she goes on a little adventure, finds where they live and visits their home, and finds out that the ants are not at all who she thought they were, and falls in love with their family and the children, and ends up building a beautiful friendship with them. Story of friendship and understanding of people's different.
Chatting with Suzanne Perrin here on Speaking of Writers. Her book is Mrs. Ladybug. So you came up with the story. I mentioned who your illustrator is in the introduction, your daughter. At what point do you bring your daughter into the mix here to do the illustration?
Typically, I write the story myself. Just it may take me some time to sort of get it all the way I want it, and I don't really say a lot to her at that point. I wait until it is as I want it, and then I send it to her. I send her a copy of it, and I allow her to take the time to read it, to see if it has meaning enough to her that she feels that she can do illustrations for it. She reads it to her children, and then she gets back to it with their reactions to it, and I might do a few little changes depending at that point. Sometimes she gets her husband involved, so it's quite a family thing. And once we've decided that it is just the way we want it, I leave the story with her, and she gets busy with her illustrating.
Chatting with Suzanne Perrin here on Speaking of Writers. Her book is Mrs. Ladybug. So what ages do you write for?
I will write for 3, and so far I've written from 3-year-olds to about 11-year-old. I am starting to toss the idea around of possibly a chapter book, but right now I'm focusing on the little one.
And Mrs. Ladybug is available, this book, at writersrepublic.com, also at Amazon as well. What would you like the 3 to 11-year-olds to take away from this book?
I'd like for them to learn what quality writing and illustrations is like. I think that we need more books out there that are not just about cartoons or things that, perhaps the kids are seeing on TV. I'd like them to see that it has more depth and more imagination and more creativity than that. And also I'd like for them to be able to sit with their parents and talk about friendship and talk about acceptance of other people, and discuss how Mrs. Ladybug thought the wrong way about her neighbors, and how just getting to know her neighbors taught her that people aren't who we assume them to be, and that we need to get to know them. We need to take the time to build friendships with people.
So this book is available now, as I mentioned, at writersrepublic.com and also Amazon. When is your next book going to be available?
The next book is with my daughter right now having the pictures done. It usually takes her about 4 months, because each picture is actually a work of art. She is an artist, so she does them all by hand, and they are all watercolors. So it does take a little bit of time. So I would say within probably the next 5 months.
The kids can enjoy this one now. It is Mrs. Ladybug. The author is Suzanne Perrin. Again, it's available at writersrepublic.com and also on Amazon as well. Suzanne, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Thank you. And this is Speaking of Writers.